sorry. Can I move this table there? These chairs are very low compared to how high the table is.
Yes, no, we're also experiencing that problem, so please do move it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. But also, it's just like the team's not safe.
Those chairs like right behind you. Alright, awesome. Let's get started. Firstly, welcome to the ESL Semifinals of Worlds. Congratulations to all the teams making it. We will start with a introduction round, starting with the judges and then the teams in order. And if you could also tell us if you're willing to be streamed or not, because the debate is being streamed on YouTube. So just tell us when you introduce yourselves if you are willing to do that. My name is Bella, I'm going to be in the chair, my pronouns are she, her, and I'll go through the panel lists later this way.
Hi, Georgia. Best of luck to all teams.
You know me, she, her, best of luck.
Hi, Simon.
Salam, all the best.
Danny Keenan. Good luck.
Great, cool, opening government.
Jorge speaking first, he, him pronouns. I have no problem with public or transmission.
Fernanda second, same thing, no problem.
Awesome, OO.
The opening of the session, Elle will be speaking first. She, her pronoun.
And Carol will be speaking second, she, her pronouns. Thank you.
And you guys are okay to be streamed?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, awesome. CG?
David speaking first, no preference.
I'm speaking second, he can both consent and both speak.
Great, and CO?
CEO speaking first and all land. That's fine.
With Augustine to the
Awesome. Cool. Alright, thanks everyone. I'll use time kept, obviously time yourselves. Without delay, I welcome Prime Minister. Here.
Am I audible? Is this thing working? Yeah. Okay. Before I start, thank you, Fernanda. Thank you. Other Fernanda is my girlfriend and is in Peru and is probably watching this. Quite funny. Okay. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Both of my parents were migrants that came from other parts of the country. The only way in which I could access Microsoft Office, Adobe products, and essentially use my computer to do things that I needed for university and school was through piracy, was through the access of these one-time purchase programs. This has fucked me over and has fucked millions of people over, and we think that's morally wrong, we think that's unpermissible, and that's why we oppose this thing. Let's do some points of setup. Some of these products are crucial for the entire world. Note that, for instance, Office products, Adobe products, Microsoft products have essentially either a monopoly or almost a monopoly on these markets, right? Note that there is a lack of competition for 3 structural reasons. 1, the other competitors have lagged behind systemically, for instance, because Microsoft had a lot of antitrust violations during the 2000s that were taken into court, but the damage had already been done against these competitors. And this has happened systemically all around the tech world. Secondly, because when these products became the main product on their area, this meant that all universities, all schools, all businesses started buying them and preferring them over the competition. This lack of access to resources has damaged the competitors' ability to create rivals to these programs. And secondly, this has drastically reduced accessibility. One-time purchase of $200 is significantly cheaper than 12 payments of $20 for 20, and this goes for years because you need these products for years and years to come. And second, this has created significant problems for pirates, and I'm going to explain why is that bad, because this is an opposed motion. I really don't give a shit about these companies. Now, why is the consumer the most important stakeholder? Firstly, in terms of number, you are affecting millions of people in the world, especially in the third world countries. Note that these people are crucially important because A, they wouldn't have access to these products otherwise. They depended on piracy that has become significantly more difficult on the status quo to go into these products. Note that they wouldn't have been able to buy these products otherwise. And secondly, they have a necessity. They have no choice. For most of these companies have created situations of artificial necessity. If you buy a Tesla, you need to pay the product to use your fucking $20,000 plus car. If you want to go to university, your works are being asked to be presented in Microsoft Office formats. If you want to work, for instance, in production or graphic design, you need to use the Adobe product formats in order to present your work to your bosses or to clients. These are situations of artificial necessity are bad insofar as, for instance, you cannot put it is immoral to put a gun against someone's head and ask for money because that decision is not free. People are being coerced into giving more money to companies in order to use things that they need. And thirdly, the accessibility will not be harmed either side. Why this harms accessibility? One, the price. It is more expensive on the long run. People have to pay significantly more for the same product. Plus, this creates incentive for companies to present underdeveloped products and update them in the long run. When you are not buying a single product that depends to have all the capacities and all the abilities on the first purchase, you need these companies tend to buy you an underdeveloped version and either make you pay more because there are tiers of subscription, or they update it on the long run. This significantly affects consumer experience. Secondly, the problem that is parallel to this is that the world has gotten significantly more expensive. After the economic crisis of COVID or 2008 crisis, the prices of everything have grown. Companies failed, businesses failed, and thus reduced competition overall. This reduced the drive to lower prices and increase the quality of the ones that already exist. Moreover, we have still experienced population growth that has made everything more expensive. This creates two unique problems. Firstly, in terms of cost, it used to be two options. You buy a one-time product or you have to buy the premium subscription opportunity. Now this has shifted the market entirely to subscription-based. For companies to compete against each other, they could not afford to use a one-time program when the competitors are gaining significantly more revenue through subscription programs. The long-run need of these services pushes customers to not be able to say, no, I am not going to buy this because I have no option if I'm going to university, if I want to start my business, or if I want to use these products on my life. Why is it wrong? The first problem is that it is coercive. If you are buying a Tesla or you are buying a computer program, you already have to assume sunken costs, right? You already have to assume the payments that you have already been done. If you have paid 12 months of this program and then you stop paying, you're essentially going to lose all the work. You're probably not going to be able to access your projects or the services that these programs offer, right? So this pushes you to keep paying even if you wouldn't want to do so. And secondly, these are products that are standard on the market. This has harmed people. The less people access these programs without having to go through these expenses, and that's bad for two reasons. First, this reduced feedback from users. Less people using them implies that companies have less information of what's going on with their product and how to improve them. And secondly, this has given them less options. This has pushed one-time purchase products outside the market. I'll take the POI.
Notice how their case is very non-comparative. All that they tell us about monopolies and all that already exists, besides saying...
Yeah, this is where it gets comparative, because this has killed piracy. Why? What happened in the past? You used to have ways to crack these programs and get false keys through keygen programs. You have to false authentication of these programs in order to use it on the long term. This was crucial for the third world because the cost in dollars of these products was simply not accessible. Now, how did it happen? You have hackers and developers that knew that their work will be paid off because they just have to do it one time. If you want to crack Microsoft Office 2013, you had to do it one time, and then the product is free forever. Multiple people did it because of need. Multiple people did it because they were trying to do something good for the world. How this got fucking harder? Firstly, faking a subscription fucking sucks. You have to do monthly checks. Every month the program checks if you have verified your product. This means that you have to hack it consistently and do a lot of work to have the program be accessible. This has been significantly hard. This has made significantly harder the world for these people. Secondly, less people can do it. They have less incentives to use and invest a lot of time to pirating these programs because because it is so hard and time consuming. They rather use their time on other activities. And thirdly, people are left with outdated products. If you are a consumer that couldn't access them either way, you are now forced to use a product that went out of selling in 2013. How profit happened on either side? The main businesses and universities are the ones that paid. Consumers are not really relevant for these companies and would have paid otherwise. But now these people have left with no options.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that speech. And I now welcome Elo.
Thank you. Before I start, because it has been a long time since we have a Chinese mainland team representing here, and that's why we have a huge crowd supporting. So I want to thank my partner Carol, because without her, I won't even leave Istanbul and be here, because I don't have the kind of determination at the very first place. And thank her for the companion, the practice, and feedback all the time, and especially for BFS UEDS, the debate community in our university, and especially the people who are shouting down like back there. They're all our best friends. We have a lot of support. We have big community back in China, and we have a lot of debaters who really want to be here and want to be heard. And that's really, I'm really proud to represent them. What Prime Minister has told us is basically poor people cannot afford necessary products if they want to go to university. This is symmetric, and it's even worse in their side of house. Because if you want to buy a one-time product, for example, OpenAI, then you have to save up for a long time to buy that before you get to the university. And that means you have to have a long time before you can actually enroll or take the exam or finish the essay. And second is that it's much easier to lobby against those companies, saying that you want cheaper subscription per month instead of dropping the price for hundreds of dollars for one-time purchase. And that is why it's much worse in their side of house. And they give no comparison. That means in their side of house, there's no products because you cannot afford it at the very beginning when you enroll the university. In our side of house, at least you can get a short amount of time which you can enjoy this kind of products. And in our side of house, the kind of accessibility, it's much, much better in our side of house. And they want to argue for low price. They want to argue for accessibility towards those products. It's unlikely because simply a lot of digital products, a lot of material things are simply too high at the very beginning of the production cost. And second is that if you really want a lower price, and even if that's accessible, then you're going to have bad quality, which is initially a bad thing, especially when we're talking about a gap between third world country consumer and other consumers around the world. And lastly is that it's going to be unable for those consumers and third world people to fit in the kind of long-term update. As we already know, the iOS system constantly updating, and after 3 years, you cannot use the new iOS system anymore, and you have to buy another new iPhone, which you cannot afford, and you already have paid for a long time at the very beginning to save up to buy it. And that is why it's extremely bad in their side of house. And then several characterization before we move on. They failed to give us the characterization. I'm going to give you the characterization. With this kind of increase, for example, we're going to have the subscription provide, for example, like AI, the access to OpenAI, the access to, for example, cars and renting system, etc. And this kind of system is going to be extremely flexible. That means the consumer can cancel anytime. After 1 month, then if you want to switch to other app, if you want to switch to other company, it's easily accessible. And for developers, they can improve much more flexible with a constant feedback system, which will be much more incentivized in our setup house. I'm going to explain that later. And then we're going to have this kind of comparison that the kind of pilot period is going to exist symmetrically, and a pilot period in their setup house in today's status quo is not enough for several reasons. Because for a lot of time, the product, for example, the AI, for example, the vehicles, oftentimes, like the period of time you just got is simply not enough to reflect the stability, not enough to reflect the quality. And that is why oftentimes we want to see the car, whether it's sustainable or not, whether you can use it for 10 years or not. Oftentimes you need a much longer time to try it. And second is that oftentimes a lot of students only need AI in the final week, right? And that is why in our setup house, we have much better accessibility and much better autonomy and decision for consumers. Here's our arguments. The first one, directly, accessibility, autonomy. Because directly in our setup house, with the subscription model, we have much more flexible time management. That means for a lot of poor students like us, like studying in China, can't afford OpenAI for a one-time buyer, then poor students in final week, if you want to finish your essay on time, then you can just buy the OpenAI subscription for 1 month or even 2 weeks. And that is how you can finish your essay. That is how you can get a high grade instead comparatively of those rich students who oftentimes have the kind of access towards OpenAI, right? And that is directly benefit we can get to those so-called third world consumers. And second is that there are a lot of buy products alongside with this kind of product we're talking about. For example, if you buy a car, you have to buy insurance, you have to buy furniture, so you have to maintain the car for a long time, etc. That directly means, long-termly speaking, the price directly increase. But in our setup house, the subscription model more likely to be, for example, the insurance comes with a subscription, the furniture done already in a car, and that is why directly in our setup house we have lower price for this kind of buy products, and we have more choice because, as I have already talked before in my characterization, we have coexisting the model of one-time products and subscription because it's like a shifting of increase, right? In our setup house, directly the consumers can better choose which products they want to buy, which kind of one-time products they're gonna use the kind of money that save up for 1 year or 2 years directly, and we have small amount of price directly. For example, you're gonna rent a suit to do an interview. It directly enable a lot of poor students to find a better job because you directly gonna have much better impression from the boss, and directly for poor students you get a better grades enabled by AI, enabled by a lot of subscription that is done in our setup house. That is why we close the gap between rich students who always have the products. And second is that a lot of people actually want to have this kind of incentive to start up like a small business or a family business. Oftentimes they require, for example, a truck, for example, some kind of digital products and this kind of like calculating machines calculating models to actually do the kind of finance stuff. But in our setup house, the kind of sink cost for them to try out this kind of small business extremely low, and that is why in our setup house we enable them with more opportunity to try this kind of small business, directly more opportunity to lift them out of poverty. Second is that directly we have much better decisions and much better market competition because in our setup house directly the consumers try more, the consumers have more choice, the consumer can cancel the kind of subscription after 1 month or 2 months. And second is that directly we have more informed choice because previously speaking in the comparison, a lot of companies, especially small companies, they like to kind of have the fake information and the big and empty promise to lure you into buying their one-time products, and then you're gonna collect a bunch of money after it, and then you're gonna run away, right? And this is why a lot of consumers are rejecting small companies and small products and new innovation in today's status quo. But in our setup house, directly we have more incentive for the companies to dispose this kind of information more thoroughly, less hiding of information. And lastly is that these kind of systems are gonna benefit the startup a lot more because as I have talked in today's status quo, a lot of consumers reject to try this kind of innovation that is initiated by a lot of startup because they fear that this kind of startup are gonna run away, are not gonna keep on with their products update, are not gonna guarantee their refund, etc., etc. That is why only big company have the kind of confidence to guarantee this kind of consumers buying their products. That is why with this kind of subscription increasingly spread, we have more opportunity for consumers to actually buy in for those kind of innovations by these kind of small products. And lastly, about innovation directly, because consumers are more flexible, consumers has more incentive to give feedback because they're going to decide whether they're going to keep on the subscription or not. That is why directly the companies have much more feedback. Directly, the company have much more competition, as they have talked about. And that is why with more innovation, more competition, more consumers benefited, more poor students like us can finish their essay on time.
Thank you so much for that speech, and I now welcome DPM.
Okay, so first just saying the VUDC is an academic activity. Whatever I say is not my personal opinion. I want to be a diplomat. I don't want to get fucked in the long run because of the things I say. So I just want to thank everyone in Latin America that is here. This is probably the first Worlds we haven't had to like literally enter debt to be either like able to pay our like plane tickets. So I'm glad to see a lot of Latin American people here. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to come next year because, like, again, tickets to Europe are kind of expensive. And I just want to thank Grecia. She was my best friend. Sadly, she passed away last year. She used to do the debate. I didn't get to dedicate to her the semifinals because we didn't make it. I don't want to make the same mistake. So this debate is for her, and every debate is for her. So I'm gonna start in 3, 2, 1 now. I think the problem with those cases is that this doesn't deal with all of our mechanisms as to why piracy is way more accessible when you don't have subscription-based like models, right? Because all of their things are about you have more accessibility when you can only pay for 1 month. Therefore, that is why this is like better on the long run for consumer autonomy. That is contingent on the fact that you don't have cheap alternatives on our side. We think you actually have cheaper alternatives on our side that last way more long time. When the hackers depend on getting out revenue from their like pages in which you have to transit in order to, like, again, access like these links to be able to download this, it is way more like profitable for them to actually get actually do this because the sunk cost that they have in the beginning is like fairly easily paid, right? They only have to do this one time. They only have to hack the program one time and give you like the fucking like program file to execute it, right? When you have to do this constantly every single month and authenticate it is when it's just not as profitable anymore because you have a lot of more safeguards that you have to go through. This is based on accounts, which means that you need to have an authenticator for each different account. They cannot be shared throughout different different devices, etc., which means that you need to put in way more work in order to do this. That is why it is structurally harder to hack these things. We think that it is way easier when you have a one time purchase model for several reasons, right? Like there's lots of demands, there's people in need that actually like do need this, programs, etc. You have like this general narrative of like the internet Robin Hood that wants to go against like this greedy companies, etc. Like that is why you get piracy, that, and like we have already explained why their case makes it way harder. Then the reason why you have more accessibility on our side, because we clear, right, when you can actually access this through other means, which are way less expensive because you don't necessarily have to pay like the full like cost in the beginning. I'm gonna explain later why we still win in those scenarios. It means that their problems are way better solved on our side. What this has made it is that it's actually less accessible. But in the case of, yeah, sure, you can have subscription-based models and you can just like buy one thing for 1 week. We think that that is contingent on certain types of products, right? We have to talk about the generality. What the rise has like meant, or the tendency, or however it's phrased, increased shift has meant is that more companies do this, right? Like you have more companies like shifting through these models, which means that now you have to pay monthly for way more things. It's not just OpenAI, it's using Office, it's using Adobe, it's using things that Gauss has explained that you actually do need to use constantly, especially because there's already a sunken cost. Like look, in the cases in which it's like first purchasing things and then using the subscriptions, that's way more coercive because I've already bought a fucking Tesla. I cannot just not pay the subscription. And like, I don't know, like maybe my like back camera doesn't work, right? Like that means that you have way more incentive, like people are way more coerced into continuously paying that thing, right? And the problem with that is that when you have hard times, when you like maybe don't have like as much money as you expected to have in 1 month, then it becomes way harder to way harder to pay these things, and you have a justification that you do need these things in your daily in life, right? That is why then it's extremely coercive that you have the subscription-based models in comparison of just paying one time. Regarding the fact that maybe like the increased like fixed cost in the beginning can be like can mean that it's hard for some people to access. We think that the comparative this is still better, right? Because again, like firstly, we think that you generally do spend more money on the long run. Like again, if I have to pay like I don't know, $100 now, it's different, and I have a program for 5 years, or I use it like through all college, that is way lower than having to pay $10 every single month for those 5 years, right? You can make the math yourselves. I'm not great at math, but I mean, it is like a larger price that you have to pay, right? That means that you are not only coerced into paying more, but you actually end up paying more. That is where consumer autonomy goes down. Because the problem is that exactly their case, right? People believe that they're paying less. People believe that they can just like pay for 1 month and be done with it. But when they need those documents, when they need the things that they have created in them, it's when they actually have to continue paying more. It's a false sense of security that they're drawn in, believe that they're paying little every single month, when in actuality it's something that gets aggregated and it ends up being more than why they would have paid in the first place, right? I think that again the very initial accessibility is like solved in many ways, and it was solved in many ways before these models through piracy, etc. Like we think that the company still subsisted because you still have like some official like companies that cannot just do that because again, like intellectual property laws, like universities, schools, companies still paid, so you still had innovation because you still had profits through, like from those companies, etc. Which means that it's unclear what the particular benefit is of that, right? Regarding the fact that there could be innovation or could be updates with that, right? I think that the iPhone is still going to not last like for longer than 3 years because you cannot update the physical product, right? Like you still have to buy a new one because the physical product doesn't have the capacity to harbor more updates. That is not the types of products like that would get better with subscription-based like models, right? It would be the ones that are purely digital, don't need like any physical modification. We think that again, in those cases, even if a new like alternative version is like brought up and you have to pay the alternative versions, there are again easier ways to get it. But even if not, we think that it's still better that people can actually choose whether or not they want to assume this cost and not like be sent into not be led to a false sense of security regarding whether or not they're paying too much for it or not. They can better plan if they know what the fixed cost is. But go.
In their worlds, you own a Nissan, which you still have to pay the maintenance for. In ours, you own a Tesla, where Tesla actively does the maintenance for you, but at the price of monthly subscription.
And if I'm very careful with my car and I don't crash it or anything, I still pay exorbitant amounts in that maintenance that it doesn't need. I can better choose when I don't have a subscription-based model where I have to think of whether or not I might have an accident I may want to pay this month, where I can decide afterwards if I want to pay the fixed cost of, I don't know, painting it or anything. That doesn't deal with the fact that it's coercive. At the end of this round, like what we've already proven to you, is that innovation is not something that is like really harmed and delayed when you have like one-time purchases, right? Because like that literally has happened throughout time that Microsoft has innovated, even when you had the one purchase models and it worked fine, right? What matters more is that you have A, accessibility, and B, that it is not like coercive to the consumer. Regarding autonomy, we think this is fixed like by the large mechanisms, but even if not, we think it's better for people to not go into these schemes in which they will continue to have to pay, in which they think are necessary by the framing of the goals, as already explained, and wasn't contested. We think that in the long run, it's better than for people to be able to opt into these purchases than to be coerced into continue paying subscriptions.
Fantastic, thank you so much for that speech. And now to round up our top half, I welcome Dilo.
Thank you. By the way, it's BFSU, so thank you. Okay. So before I start my speech, I would like to say thank you to all of our friends who come here today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We feel like Chinese help Chinese. Okay. And also, we want to say thank you to those who are physically in China but mentally with us. Thank you so much for their support along the way. I'll just name a few of our friends like Betty, Andy, Catherines, Mindy, Iris Sain, Ivy, Ray, Judy, Momo, Lauren, Sharon, and many other people. So thank you so much. And lastly, thank you for my partner, Elle. thank you for being so supportive, debate-wise and also life-wise. 2024 was really, really tough, and thank you for being with me all the time. Okay. Cool. Without further ado, my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. The first thing I'm going to do in my speech is the accessibility clash, because I think that's the only thing open government provided you with. First, response. I think monopoly is completely symmetric, right? Big companies like Office are going to be monopolizing the market on both sides of the house, but probably even less monopolizing the entire market on our side of the house. I'll explain later. But given the fact that Office will probably monopolize on both sides of the house, there's an equal incentive to exploit the consumers, right? So on the other side of the house, big companies like Office also have full incentive to make sure they raise the price as high as possible, given that you still have to rely on my Office software anyways. Secondly, we would probably like to flip the idea that one-time payment is necessarily cheaper than subscription. Note, I think the only analysis you get from PM is the idea that, it's 12 months. It's like a lot of months, so it's probably more expensive than one-time payment. No, that's not necessarily the case for a few reasons. Firstly, I think you need to consider in the status quo, we live in a society where a lot of technological development are very, very rapid. Iterations and upgradings are extremely quick. So you don't use iPhones for a long period of time. You have to change it to a new version of iPhone, because iPhone company literally actually make the old version harder to use and stuck more often and stuff, right? So you don't use the product on their side house for the rest of your life, and that's the same for ChatGPT and stuff. They will upgrade and they'll ask you to buy a new version instead of stick with the old version for the rest of your life. So that's the first reason why it's not cheaper on their side of the house. And the second thing is, I think on our side house there's probably more competition. This is because you can shift your subscription at any time, right? And the sunk cost is low. If they want to talk about sunk cost, obviously the sunk cost is lower on our side house, but you can switch it literally every month or every single year. I'll take you in a minute. And thirdly, they talk about inflation. They try to say inflation means it becomes more and more expensive over months. I would like to flip this by saying when economy is bad, when people don't have enough money on the pockets, on our side house, these companies have even more incentive to lower down the price in order to keep the consumers, because they still want consumers on our side house, even in times where economy is bad, right? But on your side house, these people are simply not going to be accessible to these specific kinds of products. The next response is, they try to say, if you stop using Office, if you use Office after 12 months and you stop using it, you lose all your work. That's not the case, and we're going to flip it completely. On opposition side of the house, we live in a world with increased shift to subscription-based business models, right? This means more and more companies are doing this, and this also means more companies have more levels of incentive to make your documents accessible and compatible to different kinds of softwares. On their side of the house, if it's a one-time payment, they literally don't have the incentive to make the documents compatible to other softwares, right? That is the real comparative in this debate. That's why they lose based on their own metric. Next thing, they try to say, when you suffer economically, you cannot afford for a new month. I think that's good because you have the free choice, right? You can choose to change your decision in every single month. Isn't that better? It's worse on your side house when you have a car mortgage and you have to pay back every single month, but when you don't have the money, you still don't have the money on your side house. And then you have to rely on things like debt. You have to borrow. Isn't that worse? Lastly, they try to talk about feedback is more on their side house. I think my partner gave pretty good responses on this and say feedback is way better on our side house because you not only need to attract your consumers at one time, you literally have to maintain your consumers for every single month. Obviously, you have way more incentive to get more feedback. You have way more incentive to make sure that your quality is always at your service is always at high quality. Yeah, sure.
Why do I need the newest version of the thing that you're buying?
Because in a consumerism society, I think a lot of the companies literally have the incentive to make sure the old versions are not durable anymore, right? This looks like, for example, the Apple company are literally making the older version stuck with Wi-Fi and internet and stuff in order to push consumers to actually go get the new version. And also because I think these companies have way more power asymmetry over individual consumers because they have literally a team that decides how to attract consumers to impulsively buy my product every single time I upgrade the version. So that's why we win the accessibility clash completely. And now, extensions. Why do we think on our side house, it's way more environmental friendly? Two mechanisms. Firstly, we have more sharing of resources and we reduce the amount of idle assets in our our society, right? Because for things like bikes, for things like cars, you don't need it all the time. Sometimes you need it like intensively for a month or a year when you live in a specific city, but after that period of time, you move to another city and stuff. So I think on our side house, you're able to share the resources way better when you can simply have subscription only for a month, only for like a year and stuff. And also, note, the framing here is that this doesn't contradict with our argument about increased accessibility, because we're increasing accessibility for the poor, but for massive middle class people, you literally have way less like time of ownership for each and every like different kinds of services for cars and bikes and open AI stuff like that. So we do like increase accessibility for the poor, and at the same time, we reduce the total amount of resources we are using on our side of the house. And also, I think when we are able to share things like cars, we also need way less parking slots, because even in times when you have to because on your side of the house, even in times you don't have to use your car, it still takes like a parking slot, right? And that also costs a lot of money and resources on your side. The second reason is because we structurally changed the incentive of companies. Note, we live in a consumerism society, right? This means on opposition side of the house, when it's one-time purchase, companies literally have the incentive to reduce the durability of a lot of different kinds of products so that you can buy a new one, right? This looks like, for example, we actually have a lot of technology to make sure a refrigerator can use way longer than in the current status quo, but still, companies have the incentive to make sure you don't use it for that long, because if you don't use it for that long, you're gonna buy a new one, right? That kind of incentive directly disappear on our side of the house, because the fixed cost for one Apple iPhone is the same. So this means for Apple company, the longer each iPhone can be used, the more money it's able to earn, right? That's why on our side, how structurally speaking, companies have more incentive to make sure every single product is used for a longer period of time and is used in a more durable manner. Why is this extremely impactful and important? Firstly, I think environment is just simply extremely important, right? We live in a society with limited amount of resources and not enough resources. A lot of people are starving. A lot of people suffer from like not good enough air. They suffer from like food safety issues because of like the soil is polluted and stuff. On our side house, obviously you have way less pollution because you produce way less. Like the pollution during the process is definitely going to be decreased. This means we have better air, we have cleaner land, we have better food and everything, right? This also means we are able to some degree alleviate the issue with like climate change and stuff. The framing here is very clear. I know environment might be off clash, but for two things, guys, you should still consider this in this debate. Firstly, I think this is a certain benefit in this debate, right? For 100%, we're able to make the environment significantly better, benefiting people on the ground. The food you eat, the air you breathe, every single day, it's gonna be way better, right? And secondly, I think the magnitude is extremely huge. So even if it's off clash, it's still an important argument in this debate, because all consumers are gonna be influenced to some degree, except for like the richest people. And you are literally changing your habit every single year, every single day, right? So we also fundamentally changed the incentive of like producers. For all of these reasons, extremely proud to oppose.
Great, thank you so much for that speech, and thank you so much to top half. And now with our back half, I welcome Governor.
This wasn't very strategic.
Cool. Not gonna do long thank yous, but we are the first Slovenian team to break at any category at Worlds, and even if I'm a bit disappointed with the way this went for us, I'm incredibly happy and thankful to both Mai and anybody else that supported us in our journey, even though our coach didn't coach us very much, but still thank you, Rod Hefner. More importantly, if you will look at our desk while I'm speaking and care more about that, there's a flag that all of you should pay attention to, and just that being here is important in and of itself. I mean, to mirror the sentiments of other people that are doing it, Manuel, and anybody else at the tournament that supports this. Cool. Assuming the panel is ready. A couple of things I want to clarify at the top. Number one, this isn't a debate about whether things like rent a car or rent a bike exist, or whether you can generally rent a calculator if I don't need to purchase one for the rest of my life. I think there's things that existed before the narrative establishes itself. I think this is outside of things that are subscription-based, because just renting something for a certain period of time can also just be done by you pay me $20 to rent this for the next month, and then this goes away, right? This isn't a subscription-based service in that exact degree. Two, on environmental regulation and other stuff. I think to some extent it is likely that if opening opposition wants to assert that there's
general shift towards climate positive policy, this exists with one-time purchase as well. This means there is increased regulations of things like companies doing unsustainable shit, like making iPhones collapse after a couple of years. There's a collection active lawsuit against Apple for the type of stuff that they did. This is something you're able to claim A, money for, but B, this is something holds companies accountable to these sort of things. It holds companies accountable to environmental metrics. I think this is something that exists to some extent on either side of the house. 2 extensions from us, 1 vertical on the amount of money that people spend, 2 on the quality of things that are likely to go down on opposition bench. Also probably engaging with some stuff that came out in DLO and might come out in the DPM and might come out in C DLO. Okay, cool. First, on the amount of money that individuals are likely to spend on this, mechanizing some of the stuff that our opening tells you, but I think they're largely asserted or rely on the impact of piracy being the way that you're going to access these things. And I'm unclear as to why the initial upfront costs are necessarily lower when you need to one-time purchase these things. First, on the access to institutions and universities, particularly for people in disadvantaged communities, specifically on things that you need in the kind of this debate. This means Microsoft Word, this means software that you use for research and other type of things that is increasingly becoming subscription-based. I think this is incredibly important. Right? Because as our opening says, these things are necessities. That is to say, you cannot opt out of buying these things or using them if you wish to go to universities. The important thing is, the way that a lot of students access this is through their university purchasing these type of things. The university gives you Microsoft access, it gives you research portal access and stuff like that. The reason that a university, specifically disadvantaged universities, cannot do it understand the house is because these universities often have the money to buy an upfront thing, they have the money to buy it 10, 15 years ago, or they're able to get sponsorships to buy these kind of things in a one-time purchase, right? They have access to government resources, they have access to tuition fees, they're far richer than the average consumer. The difference here though is, if you buy it one time, it lasts the university a long period of time. So if my university bought this thing 10 years ago, also particularly when this was cheaper, because things like inflation and stuff like that exist, university keeps access to this sort of thing and is able to provide it to the students of the university. The comparative is, yes, maybe the university is able to pay these things in installments and does so for a certain period of time, but after a particular tipping point, the cost of this is incredibly high. After a particular tipping point, specifically as things get more expensive because of inflation, a lot of universities in the developing world cannot afford to continuously pay these type of subscriptions, nor they can give their students access to the things that they bought before. B, this is true on an individual level. A lot of people, specifically the disadvantaged that opening opposition wants to talk about, don't buy things for one time because this is still expensive, right? It's still expensive to buy something for a month and then not have access to these type of things. The way they're far more likely to have it is from their parents, from their friends, from individuals that pass these type of things on when I'm done with using it. When I'm done with using my access to Microsoft Word or ChatGPT, I pass it on to individuals that are able to maintain this access over generations. Parents give their phones to children when they no longer use them or want to upgrade to a different phone. Notice, they say, but companies structurally destroy these kind of things and they become old. Cool, but an old phone is better than the lack of thereof, right? Even if my iPhone slightly overheats because it is 10 years old, it is still far better than an inability to have these type of things in the first place, right? Just on a bare minimum of the possibility to access these type of things to these kind of things. But 2, and this is important, the way that poverty perpetuates is that you continuously need to buy these things. The way that poverty perpetuates is that you cannot pass things on to your children, but both you and your children need to continuously pay. I need to continuously buy, shitty shoes, or I need to continuously pay to the subscription services that these kinds of things happen. The comparative is simple. Maybe you have access to bad stuff and stuff that is old, but you have access to stuff, and I think proving this fundamentally is just far more important because people in the past were able to buy this and they're able to pass this on to you. Cool. 3, individuals spend more money because it is a perception that you're spending a lot less money. This is mechanizing opening government on why in the long run you're likely to be paying these sort of things. Individuals think that they're not spending a lot. Individuals think that paying €5 every month is not a massive setback. This is especially true for the middle class, right? Because those in poverty probably don't buy luxury subscription services like Spotify anyways. But your average person in this room does not notice €5 automatically disappearing from your bank account because you have direct debit authorization on for Spotify and a million other subscription services that you own. It is this kind of subconscious spending that doesn't make you think of what the things that you are purchasing are. When opening opposition says that it's easier to switch, I think this is probably true to some extent. But the way that this manifests is that I buy a bunch of shit. I have a Netflix subscription, I have a Spotify subscription, I have a subscription to food services and ChatGPT because this is ridiculously cheap to my monkey brain. Because my monkey brain goes, €2 is nothing. What is the point of not spending this when I'm getting access to a particular service in this period of time? fine. But 3, they say, you only need it for some time. Guys, you write multiple essays a year, right? People are short-termists, similarly to how opening opposition is. So the trick that people fall into is I will never need this again, and I end up buying this 2 months later on another monthly subscription after I canceled the month before, because I suddenly realized that maybe I wanted to watch more than one TV series. Maybe I wanted to write more than one essay with the help of ChatGPT. This is the trap that you fall into on OpBench. Closing. Opening.
I think on our side, house companies like ChatGPT absolutely have like full incentive to offer university a different product. For example, like buying collective account per month and stuff. Why is it inaccessible at the end of the day?
Because the companies don't give a shit about poor universities, because the primary money makers are those that are rich, right? I don't see why this incentive exists. You don't make this, you cannot POI me this in 15 seconds. Cool. Second horizontal extension on quality of these type of things, also directly engaging with opening opposition. Number 1, they say, the quality is going to increase because you now have to cater to the consumer on a regular basis. A couple of things to this. 1, there's less expectation from the side of the consumer to both A, the amount of service provided, but B, the quality provided. This is important. Why? Because consumers are far more likely to just spend money on incredibly poor and underdeveloped things. The reason this is true is because of the metrics I gave you previously on how you have a perception of this being cheaper. Companies are able to justify including less features in this type of things and charging, therefore, lower prices in the short run, but far higher things in the long run. But B, I would just posit that spending any amount of money on something that is bad is a bad thing. The comparative is very simple. Consumers expect more and hold companies accountable to this. They use return policies. They go into public outcry and boycott of these type of companies. They sue companies like people did in class action lawsuits when Apple caused their iPhones to explode or batteries to not work. This structurally pushes companies to give people better things because people learn to expect better things. But B, and this is important, companies on their side of the house just want to keep you engaged. So they give you short-term flashy updates every month to get you to buy the new thing, or they give you stuff like Spotify Wrapped, but never tangibly improve the quality. Because of the low price, the illusion of low price, you can justify these sort of things. For all these reasons, CG.
Great, thank you so much for that speech, and I now welcome the op member.
Okay, let me just set up my papers. Set up my timer. Am I audible if I speak like this? Okay, before I begin, I just want to shout out to my partner, Gaston, who has carried me in this tournament. And I also want to shout out to Africa. You know, not so many African teams made it this far, so I just want to shout out to all the Africans out there, right? Yeah, so I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to represent our beautiful continent. So without further ado, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, I think the biggest problem in opening half is how they care so much about the consumers, but forget about the realities of capitalism, that it is only when companies are able to function that you can better be able to get the types of accessibility that opening half so much cares about. What we tell you in closing half is that if we're able to make companies function better, we are able then to get or co-opt all of the benefits that have been mentioned in opening half, right? So that is how our extension essentially looks like, right? And I want to just first of all outframe the first thing, right? And this is, and it's this, right? Op cares talks about things like coercion and how, they force individuals, right? But notice how on their comparative, at a point in which you have such models, subscription models, competing with other models, like with these two models competing with each other, that is when you have the type of coercion that they have been talking about for 14 minutes. We tell you that on our side of the world, when you have a collective shift, the lack of that competition thereof removes that type of coercion that they talk about in today's debate. What is then what is the metric of opposition, right? Because no one has established when we oppose something. We oppose something when A, it limits the extent is to it when something we oppose something when it harms the economy essentially. So that's how we're going to show you now impacting how this trickles down to things like affecting the economy, right? So our first argument, first extension. We prevent the failing of companies. The premise or thesis of this argument is simple. What we tell you, Chair, is that in the vast majority of cases, the reason why companies fail to at least function or at the very least function properly is because there isn't no guaranteed or consolidation of a consumer base. That is to say that on their side of the world, it is unclear or there are so many exogenous forces that affect how a company works, right? But on our side of the world, we are able to guarantee or consolidate a consumer base. Why do we think so? First, consumer incentives are met. That is to say, at a point in which you have a subscription model and you're someone who's constantly paying for instance, maybe for Spotify or for a particular thing, right? What this essentially means is that you have some level of bargaining chip. That is to say, you can go up to that particular company or you can have some level of stake in what you say insofar as you have that continual payment of that particular money, which allows you therefore to assert or describe certain things that you want. But why is this something that is particularly exclusive that you can't get on their side of the world? I think the first thing that they fail to understand is that on their side of the world, you get things like planned obsolescence. So what is planned obsolescence? So this is essentially whereby they deliberately make bad products. Why? They are unsure that you are likely to buy again. So at a point in which they want to guarantee that you might come back to buy their newest version, and I don't understand why they think that on their side of the world, companies don't have an incentive to create updated versions. On their side of the world, they still have that incentive. And at a point in which they want you to get that, they make poor products so that when they no longer work on your side of the world, like when they become dysfunctional, you go back to them, and that's essentially something that one is exploitative insofar as it takes so much of your money, but two is very disingenuous insofar as they sell you a bad product that you did not expect will be dysfunctional, right? But so what this essentially means is that we outframe or in the whole idea of how on our side of the world we have bad quality. But I think a second reason why you don't get the type of like consolidation of a market base or consumer base is because of political consumerism. We now live in emotional capitalism. So that is to say, companies try so hard to connect with their consumers. At a point in which you're buying to their side of the world, companies are unsure on whether or not they have a guarantee of their consumer base. So this is where at a point in which they start to fluctuate on their beliefs and what they stand for. It is only at that point when they start doing that at the end of the day, they then go against their very principles that they stand for. But notice how on our side of the world, when you're able to have that consistent or like certain market base, that is when you're better able to have or stand for the specific beliefs that you need, and therefore that is when you're better able to consolidate the already existing consumer base that you have. This analysis proves to you how on our side of the world we're able to like consolidate a market base that they easily lose on their side of the world. Why is losing that something that is particularly crucial that tips the scale to companies ending up becoming very dysfunctional? We tell you that companies don't make a lot of money, so rely on this particular small profits and higher returns. We tell you therefore that at a point in which you no longer have such high returns, a couple of impacts accrue. Firstly, we want to concede to the fact that we know that there are a plethora of various reasons why companies might fail. But at a point in which we are able to lessen the likelihood of that particular thing happening, we think that is fine on our side of the world. So the first impact that you have on their side of the world is the fact that companies, because they fail to have that consolidated consumer base, they end up doing things like A, not having enough sufficient money to pay off their workers. Two likely things to happen. One, that is when at the end of the day, you create the demonization in the workplace. The type of treatments that they talk about, because they no longer remunerate their workers perfectly because they no longer have enough money, or essentially they do things like avoiding employment. Or at the very least, what happens is, in order to try to solve that, their pricing goes up so that they are better able to pay like those particular workers. What does this essentially mean? It means that it blocks out all of the accessibility chat that everyone up and down the bench in Gov actually advocates for. But essentially, we think the worst case scenario is essentially them cutting off unemployment and things of that nature, right? Notice again, Chair, thirdly, how even in economic crisis, which is what they have tried to characterize, how on our side of the world, you have these particular consumers being clearly not facing the whims of that economic crisis. That is to say, on their side of the world, because in economic whims affect how companies work, they are likely to increase prices, etc. Because on our side of the world, loyalty is guaranteed. That means companies don't have an incentive to remove you out of the picture. They understand that one way or another, if the economy is stable, you are more likely to be a guaranteed consolidated consumer base and are likely to be more lenient, and therefore, even in an economic crisis, you are still able to have that type of accessibility that they so much care about, right? But again, what we tell you, Chair, on our side of the world is essentially how we're able to create the maintenance of these particular companies. And we say that the comparative here is simple. On our side of the world, companies are able to get the profit that they need immediately, and this is a time factor, right? And we think that is important because at the point in which they get that money immediately, they are less likely going to engage or have an incentive to engage in practices that are immoral because they are now desperate to get that money. On their side of the world, because you have an unguaranteed consolidated market base, that is when companies engage in things like price gouging and other unhealthy economic tendencies that affect the consumer base that all of us care about. I think one thing to understand in today's debate is simple. In order for consumers that we all care about to be happy, the very companies have to be functional. And what we have proven to you is how we have functional companies on our side of the world, and now all the impacts are contingent on our analysis. Proud.
First, dealing with CO, they say that insofar as companies are unsure on whether or not they're going to be getting money, that means that they are going to fail. 1, that's not proven. 2, most companies don't function on the basis of subscription. Insofar as this is true, I'm unsure to the margin of the impact here. And 3, if it's true that the companies will have, by this design, a guarantee of a continuous subscription, this concedes to the fact that people are not going to have an informed choice, which to some degree nice as well. Lastly, we prefer a world in which these companies don't have a guarantee, because this means that they're forced to innovate because they need to get new people to buy the things. What do I mean by that? You don't have to have the same exact product continuously having faulty updates, but you need to continuously bring people in. And this is where David's extension comes in, right? Insofar as you need to make people willing to put a lot of money into a particular product, there needs to be a damn good reason for you to be able to buy that product. I'm unwilling to buy that product insofar as it doesn't have innovation, insofar as it doesn't have better stuff. Or if I already have bought a product and the question is whether or not I'm going to buy it again in the future, it has to be successful. It has to be not to fail. I'm extremely happy with my Huawei phone because it has been functioning for 5 years. I'm likely going to buy it from the same company. This is the exact same analysis, and it was an expensive phone, so I don't understand why it needs to be incredibly cheap. I do think that CO is to some degree out of the debate, which is unfortunate because I do really like the way that they debate. Let's talk about our case and explain why we win over other teams as well, directly engaging also with CO, so this is not the only engagement. CG says very simply, we say that we have 1, the amount of money that every individual spends is more because you perceive it to be less. As in, I believe that I am only spending like €5 per month on Spotify, and I'm willing to do that because I don't think that that is that big. I don't think that, 1, most people need to be spending things on like Spotify and things like that, so this is already an impact. But 2, the way that this functions is that it coerces individuals, and this unlocks the impacts coming from OG, right? They talk about how it's more expensive and how, like, just generally people are unwilling to put this amount of money. But we mechanize the psychological impacts on the individual, as in we mechanize as to why individuals are willing to not do the mathematical calculations. And insofar as this is true, we prove the principal impact of of coercion, but also we previewed other things, and this is when second extension comes in, right? The quality of things go up. Why is this true? Because of one, the incentive for me to be more willing to think about the things that I'm buying, but also because of the analysis that I just gave you, right? Because companies are suddenly forced to innovate, companies are suddenly forced to give me very good reasons to do better stuff, and thus we get better quality. But also, this gives me the incentive to lower the costs for the average individual for two main reasons. One, older things still exist on our side of the house, and this is really, really, really important. I don't understand why I need the newest iPhone. I don't understand why I need the newest version of Adobe. And insofar as this is true, poorer people have better access to even non-pirated goods. But also, the money is also catering towards the general population, and you don't have to coerce the people into long-term spending more money into your product, but also in the short term just give you the more amount of money. And this impacts a lot of the things coming from video things. Let's deal with other two teams before moving on. Opening.
I think there's less coercion on our side, House, because firstly, we're more informed when you can shift your subscriptions and try out different products. And number two, there's the barrier to change is just far lower, enabling people's free choice to be available.
Here's the thing. One, nobody actually shifts in between these things. Like, if you have Apple Music, you're not going to go to Spotify or vice versa because you're already used to it. I'm not sure as to why you're able to compare these two things. And also, in order for you to be able to compare these two things, you have to have a huge incentive for you to actually think about what is the best and what is the worst. But also, second, you don't prove to me as to why this manifests in the better product in and of itself, as in just because I have the ability to opt out, why does it mean that an individual is able to characterize what is better and what is worse? Likely, it is more so true that insofar as you need a huge incentive to analyze which is the best possible product, our side of the house is more better simply because you are spending more money and so you want to be more informed. The average individual doesn't care that much about 2 euros. Cool, let's deal with OG. OG, I think really good. OG says a lot of good things. One, they say more expensive. I already explained that we've mechanized that, right? This is a question of psychology. It's a question of how predatory companies make you believe that you're spending less money than you otherwise would be. And insofar as this is true, the impact here of spending more money is on our side of the house. We prove to you we mechanized this extension. But also, I don't think any other team deals with piracy on this from their side of the house, and I want to just explain as to why we're also over piracy, because I do think this was a really good point. Here's the thing. The margin of impact is unclear. As in, hackers exist still. I'm not sure as to why they're unable to hack the fewer products. They say, oh, they need to hack it every month. They need to hack it every month. Sure, but hackers are everywhere. And also, these are pirates. They are very incentivized to create a public domain expansion, whatever. Insofar as this is true, they're smart, they're capable. I'm not sure as to why the impact is that big. AI exists. It helps you hack. It's really good. And insofar as this is true, the more likely alternative here is of the impacts that we give you, right? The informed individual is much more likely to make better decisions, but also the universities that cannot afford to do pirating, right? Because it's a question of public image, a question of whether or not you're going to be a legitimate university. We prove to you that those universities are able to buy cheaper products, and thus the actual impact manifests better. We way over OG. Lastly, let's deal with OO. They give me a couple of things. They say that, firstly, how it's just cheaper. I don't think that this is true because, one, we do show you that it's not true. You can buy cheaper products on our side of the house. You can have a collective ownership of something, collective use of something. You get something that is cheaper that was already used in the past, and I'm not sure as to why you necessarily need it. They talk about market competition. I've already responded to that. They talk about informed choices. We've already also responded to that. Lastly, they talk about how you have, how companies have predatory incentives that older products have that are going to just fall apart. David responds to this in the event of lawsuit, but I want to flip that as well. It is much harder to do a lawsuit on our side of the house simply because it's harder to regulate the type of things that they're able to do. What do I mean by that? The incentive on their side of the house is to make it so that every single product from the same company is non-compatible to other products because this is because it forces you to buy every single thing from the same things. On our side of the house, it's unlikely for this to be the case because it still needs to be the person is more informed on our side of the house. It's because you think about it a bit more, right? You think about it a bit more. You already have one iPhone. Why would I need to buy a computer? Whether or not I'm going to buy it from Huawei or something. Yeah. And the barrier, insofar as the barrier of entry is higher on our side of the house, it's less likely that this compatibility is going to be present. It's harder to sue because it's also a question of long term. I do think that we win this debate. So very proud to be CG.
Awesome. I now welcome Whip to conclude the round.
came. So I just like to shout out every single member of MSUGD. This is an amazing feat for our union. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our patron, Mr. Lunga, for making all of this possible. And of course, to Kaylin for teaching me everything that I know about debating. So yeah. Okay. So I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Closing government cannot win this debate because they inherit all the flaws that exist in opening government's case. Notice how in their case there's not much new stuff. They simply inherit all that they get from opening government, some of which we think was better mechanized from their opening. So let's deal first with their opening and why we think they don't win this debate. 2 main flaws. Number 1, they're very non-comparative and they curse throughout their contributions. We think they should have focused on actually analyzing ideas rather than saying fuck or doodle do through all their contribution. First, the idea of monopolies. We think that the idea of monopolies is very non-comparative because it's something that is bad and exists on both sides of the world, right? We think that monopolies exist regardless. Microsoft Word already was a monopoly before it even had this whole idea of having like subscriptions for you to access it. Now let's talk about this whole idea about consumers being the most important stakeholders in today's debate. We think that opening government narrows down this debate to consumers solely, and this is something that closing government also falls into. Here's why we think we're better off for the consumer in our side of the world. The reason why they think that consumers are going to be worse off in our side of the world is because they are coerced. Notice how there's not much analysis to this, but let us show you why coercion is likely going to be worse in government side of the world. Coercion exists because people have an incentive to market towards people. When people have a need to market towards more people, it means that they have an incentive to be more coercive in order to tap into a wider consumer base. Why we think it is more likely for them to have this incentive is because for their product, they cannot have a loyal consumer base, which means they need to continue tapping into a wider audience or a wider consumer base for people to use their products. Because this incentive exists, it is more likely that they're going to want to create a coercive messaging behind their advertising campaign. Now let's talk about this whole idea of expenses and why they think it's going to be more expensive for people to have products in our side of the world, right? They think it's going to be more expensive because now you need to continue making subscriptions. We think that expenses would mount up either way, and this is something that you already get from a member in today's debate. My member explicitly tells you that expenses are continuously going to mount up because products continue to make upgrades. This means that you needed still to pay for an upgrade in 2012. If Microsoft Word had to upgrade in 2012, you needed to pay more for the upgrade in 2013 because Microsoft Word continued to upgrade. Why do we think this is better off in our side of the world and this is going to be less expensive for people in our side of the world? Why I think it's going to be less expensive is because in our side of the world, the companies have an incentive to continue making great marginal differences over months to keep their users hooked, rather than in their side of the world where this is going to be even more expensive. We think that in their world where you have this product, even if you're not paying more, the fact that you have an outdated product in today's world where it's becoming increasingly fast-paced, it is more likely that you get more benefits in our side of the world. Now let's talk about this whole idea that we get from closing government about expenses, which we don't think is better mechanized, but let us talk about what they think in today's debate, right? They say that these are necessities in universities that you cannot opt out of buying, and that these are bought by universities, and that disadvantaged people are not going to get access to this. We show you how upgrades still exist, and people still need to pay for these upgrades. If you can pay for software maintenance, you can pay for a monthly subscription. Why do we think this is likely going to be better? We think in our side of the world it's going to be better because the people who are giving you these upgrades are the very same people whom you buy this product from. In their side of the world, you are more likely going to pay for the pirated versions because these are likely going to be the versions that exist when you do not have the company itself that makes these upgrades. This means that when Tesla itself is actively coming to maintain your car, it's going to be cheaper for you than when you're looking for alternatives on the black market that are likely to harm your car because you do not get the service from your service provider. We think in terms of quality, we bring better service, and I'm going to show you why quality is the most important metric in today's debate. Now, there's something that you get from closing government. They say, well, shoes are better than no shoes, even if those shoes are bad. The only way you get shoes is if your shoemaker keeps making shoes and does not go out of business. This is likely to work out better in our world, where loyalty and a steady flow of income are preserved for these companies, rather than in theirs, where you need to continuously tap into a new consumer base, which could run out and isn't evergreen. We already show you why we still get an evergreen flow of income in our side of the world, rather than in theirs, where these companies have an incentive to continue catering to their existing loyal customer base for loyalty points. I'll take opening.
Businesses, universities on the first world are the bulk of these companies' income anyway. They will pay on either side. The people that you're pushing out of the market through killing piracy are fucked uniquely on your side.
Notice how they still fall into the very same trap of being non-competitive. If they say that people are going to be pushed out either way because of expenses, there's not something that's exclusive to our side, because these upgrades are still going to exist in their side. Very non-competitive, therefore in today's debate. Let's talk about the CG's idea about the perception of spending less money. Again, we tell you that this is likely going to exist on both sides of the house. You will still spend more on maintenance in their side of the world. The maintenance of the product is of better quality in our world, where the maintenance comes directly from your service provider. We think such maintenance is far much better. Now let's talk about the quality incentive. They think that companies have an incentive to create quality products if you're making someone pay more for the quality, for the product that they're accessing. By their logic, since they think that our products are going to be more expensive, then by their logic, it means that companies in our world are going to have a greater incentive to make quality, since they themselves say that this is going to be more expensive in our side of the world. Now let's talk about why we weigh up over our opening in today's debate, but I'll take a POI.
Your case is self-mitigating. If it's true that products need repair and replacement, companies have people that are going to have to keep buying the products, and they can just make other products. Companies don't disappear on our side of the house. Your scale of impact is small.
Che, we already show you why in our side of the world it is more likely that people pay directly to these companies and have a loyalty base because they pay subscriptions directly to these companies. And it's less likely going to be expensive because you aren't buying an entirely new product, or you aren't buying an entirely new piece of hardware to replace pieces of hardware that are already worn and torn. You are simply paying for maintenance from your existing company that you buy from. Now let's talk about why we think we rank over our opening in today's debate. We think our opening runs two important ideas. They run principles on autonomy and choice for their consumers. We think that our extension on the health of companies and the consumer-company relationship is logically prior to their contribution. How we're different from our opening in today's debate is that their idea about companies getting the incentive to do better goes beyond, our extension goes beyond their idea about companies having the incentive to do better. It goes beyond incentive and principle arguments. We show you why companies thrive better and why this is important, because everyone in this debate cares about access to products. For access to exist, the supply must be healthy and steady. This is something you exclusively get from closing opposition. We think we're the most competitive team. You need to care about both the company and the consumer. Never been prouder to oppose. Here.